I'm Amelie and welcome once again to my channel. Today I am finally continuing with my Modal Sushi book report, and today I'm going to be talking about the Contentment arc, which goes from chapters 19 to chapters 22. Yes, that's right. So again, I cannot emphasize enough, finally. I actually check because I could not for the life of me remember when was the last time I uploaded a video in this series to my channel, and I went to my channel, I checked, and it was 8 months ago. 8 months ago. Speechless. I honestly, what was I doing in that time? Now, well, to be fair, this year has been very shitty for me. Extremely shitty. Probably one of the worst years in the last 10 at least. And yes, that is counting the COVID year. 2020 to me, it was a breeze compared to everything that has been happening this year, and it's one thing after another. If it's not my health, it's something related to my family. If not, it's something technical failing. So I cannot wait for this year to be over because it has been a fucking nightmare. So that's probably why it's taking so long. To be fair, these type of videos usually are the ones that take me the longest because they are the ones that I actually have to, do something for the video beforehand. Because let's face it, for the reactions, I just have to sit down and watch an episode of something. That's it. I don't need to prepare anything. But when it comes to these videos, I have to read the chapters, I have to highlight, I have to take notes, I have to make a summary, I have to take more notes. It's a process for me, and it takes me a long time. That's just how it is. I'm not complaining because it's actually something that I really enjoy. One of my majors is in literature, so, I'm having a blast doing it. But it does take me some time, and this means that these videos are not going to come one after the other. I guess it would be easier if I did like a read along and just read the chapter, but I don't know, I don't think anybody wants to hear me read anything. And also, I don't know, I think that would be weird. It would be a longer video. I don't know how that would work. I know some other people do it, and to be honest, I've never heard any read along, so I have no idea how they work. But I don't know, I prefer to do it this way. So we'll just have to accept the fact that they're going to take long. And not to mention some of the technical difficulties that I've been having with videos lately. Because let me tell you, I have recorded this video so many times. To be fair, only 3 times in its entirety. So this is the 4th time that I actually hopefully recording the video in its entirety, and hopefully the last time. But I've started to record the video and then I have to stop. So the thing that was happening is that I recorded the video, and then when I listened to the audio, it was unusable. You just could not hear anything. There was like a lot of noise, and it was just terrible. And I tried to like maybe fix it somehow, but one, I don't know enough about audio fixing to maybe fix it. Maybe there was a way to fix it, I don't know. And second, it was very difficult. It was just a lot of noise. So I tried to find out what was happening, because I find it strange that it only happened to this video, because I had been doing reactions and I have no problems there. I did the, video with the ranking of the ships for the Untamed. I had no problem there as well. So what the hell was happening? Like, I honest to God thought that these chapters were cursed. Like, there is something happening that just not wants to put these chapters to audio. Like, they don't want to do that. So I don't know, call an exorcist. I don't know what was happening. And it was so frustrating. And, this almost drives me crazy. And this is the reason why I'm posting this video now. Originally, I had an idea to do this video for Halloween. And it was not this one that I'm speaking, not this one that I'm doing now. It was a different video. It was a reaction to something. I'm not going to say two, because then people are going to say, oh, we much prefer the other one to this one. But this is just for me. I am uploading this for Halloween because this video has haunted me for the last month, I don't know. It has been a long time. So this is my Halloween video. Happy Halloween for me, because this video has been a fucking nightmare, let me tell you. So I ended up figuring out what was the problem. And I think I may have mentioned before that I haven't been using my desktop computer because it's dead. It's just not, you just can't. I don't actually even have it anymore. So I've been using mostly my laptop, and I prefer my desktop, but what can I do? I live in Argentina, and with our economy, it doesn't look likely that I'll be able to buy one for a very long time. So I've been adapting to the laptop, and now I make peace with it, and I haven't been having any issues so far, except when I was doing this video. And I also think we have to take into consideration that the microphone I'm using is incredibly old. It's not even my microphone. My original microphone was, again, destroyed. Well, it wasn't destroyed, it just stopped working some time ago. So I borrowed this one from my brother. And if you could imagine me doing air quotes around borrowed, that's because they were there. Because I very much took the microphone without asking. He doesn't know I have it. But he doesn't use it. Like, if an older sister cannot take things from their younger brothers without permission, what else can I do? Like, what rights do I have as an older sister? So I have this microphone, and it's very old, as I said. I have dropped it a few times. One time I also dropped it and accidentally kicked it when I was trying to pick it up. So this microphone has seen some shit. It has been through some stuff. So keep that in mind when I tell you what's the problem with it. So the problem that I had is that I connected the microphone to the computer, I recorded it, but for the microphone to work, the headphones also have to be connected. I have no explanation for this, like, not at all. Like, why? Why? But I have a friend who is an electric engineer, and I asked him, like, and he's also a nerd, so he knows a lot of things about this. And she says, like, she was not a nerd, he said, but not in science things. I'm not a science nerd. I don't know anything about technology. So, as far as I was concerned, it was voodoo. It's just magic. This is curse. I'm being cursed. That is the only explanation that I can find. He says that there is an explanation. Obviously, that is a theory because he hasn't actually seen the computer or the microphone, but he has a theory about why that's happening. But anyway, it was happening. And I was confused because I have recorded videos. Like, I have recorded the ranking for the ships that I mentioned before, for the Untamed. And for that one, the same as this one, I don't actually need to use headphones. Like, I'm using the computer because I had my notes there, but I don't actually have to use headphones. And for the other one, I obviously have to use the computer as well, but I didn't use headphones either. So why that one was fine? It's very likely because I had my headphones connected. I think it was just a series of bad luck that every time that I did this video, my headphones were not connected because, let's be honest, I actually use headphones in my computer unless I'm, reacting to somebody, because I live alone. Who am I going to bother? My cats? So I don't usually use headphones because, I don't know, I actually find them a little bit bothersome. I think they give me headaches. So most of the time they are not connected. I think maybe when I did the ranking for the Untamed, for the ships, I think maybe I had been doing a reaction before. That's why they were connected. That's the only explanation that I can give. And every time that I did this, which was during the weekend, the time that is most likely for me not to use, headphones in my computer because I just watch things on my own, they weren't. So that's the only explanation that I can find for this, because otherwise, and that's the only explanation that I'm going to give. I'm closing the case in this one. I'm happy with that explanation. That I need to move on from this video because it's honestly haunting me. I'm going to have more nightmares about this. So I'm really hoping that this is working. Like, my headphones are definitely connected, although I'm not using them. So let's hope this works. Let's hope you are actually listening to this, because if I finish recording this and I find that there were know that there was no sound, that it's working badly, that it just didn't record anything. Well, it didn't record anything, but it's unusable. Then I'm going to lose my fucking mouth. I'm just going crazy with this video. So if that happens, then say goodbye to this series. I'm not recording any more videos for this because it's too much. But I'm pretty certain that that is not going to happen. I'm pretty certain that, you know, this one is the good one. So that is pretty much all the explanation that I had. So happy Halloween, enjoy this video. So before we go into the chapters, let me just say that I actually switched things around for this video. For the previous videos, what I did was I talk about the stories of all of the chapters, and then I did my commentary. And I think in the last chapter, in the last video that I did chapter by chapter. So I did a whole chapter, I talk about the story, and then my commentary. For this video, for these chapters, I just put my commentary in the middle. It's just the way that I organize my notes, and I kind of think that it works better. I don't know. So you will have to tell me if you prefer this one or the old way, but that's the way that I'm doing it. So that's it. Let's just go into the contentment arc. So let's talk about chapter 19. But before we go into the events of this chapter, let's just discuss a little bit what happened in the previous chapters and what is the story so far. So first of all, we have Wei Wuxian dying. That is the first thing that happens in the book, or rather the announcement of his death, because we don't actually see how he dies. We just get someone saying that he's dead. That is literally the first line in the book. This announcement follows a lot of people being very happy because, you know, what do they know about his story? They are people who didn't actually know him. And as far as they are concerned, Wei Wuxian was just a piece of shit who had a lot of power and was doing a lot of horrible things. So they are happy and they're celebrating that he died. And as far as they are concerned, Wei Wuxian had it coming because of everything that he had done. Fast forward 13 years, and we have this character called Mo Xuanyu. Mo Xuanyu, he has a very bad relationship with his family, and what he does is sacrifice himself so, you know, he can bring Wei Wuxian back, and Wei Wuxian would avenge him by killing his family. Now, Wei Wuxian doesn't come into his body, he actually comes into the body of Mo Xuanyu. So now he looks like Mo Xuanyu. And once he's in Mo Xuanyu's body, now he has to go and kill his family. However, he never actually gets to do that because very conveniently an arm shows up out of nowhere. This is a dead arm, we can safely say, and this arm starts possessing people and they starts killing them. It's just going around just killing people, and the juniors are there, but nothing happens to them, and the arm is out of control. It's, you know, very difficult to stop. So Lang Wangji shows up and it stopped it. Before, obviously, Wei Wuxian can actually meet Lang Wangji because he believes that if Lang Wangji knows who he is, that Lang Wangji is going to kill him because he has no idea, the poor boy. So the Mo family is dead, not because Wei Wuxian did anything. Pretty much the arm did whole work for him, and now he just goes away. He escapes before Lang Wangji can recognize him. He takes a donkey and goes, and a few days later he managed to arrive to this place called Phoenix Mountain. Phoenix Mountain, there is a night hunt going on, and there he meets Jingling, who he actually doesn't know. I mean, Wei Wuxian doesn't know who he is. Like, he doesn't know that he's related to him. But Jingling recognized him as Mo Xuanyu, and here Wei Wuxian finds out that Mo Xuanyu was actually the illegitimate son of Jing Wanzhan, who is the sect leader of the Jing sect. And that he had been expelled, and then his life has been horrible. So the first meeting between Wei Wuxian and Jingling doesn't go very well. Wei Wuxian just antagonizes him and ends up offending him, and Cheng Cheng shows up. And Cheng Cheng obviously, again, doesn't recognize him, but it definitely recognizes that he's using some kind of demonic tricks, that he's using some demonic cultivation. And at this stage, Cheng Cheng's just not accepting that. He does not want to even know about it. He doesn't accept any type of demonic cultivation. So what he wants to do is to take Wei Wuxian, or at least not Wei Wuxian, he wants to take Mo Xuanyu, but we know it's Wei Wuxian, to Lotus Pier so he can torture him and very possibly kill him. Now, Shang Cheng in the first chapters, he's not he's not shown in the best light. We'll see what happens in the rest of the book, but at least so far as I have read, he's not coming out great. So he's about to take Wei Wuxian to Lotus Pier, and Lan Wangji appears, and he saves him. He's essentially just doesn't allow Cheng Cheng to take him. But now Wei Wuxian is just right in front of him. So as a way for Lan Wangji to maybe don't want to, get close to him, Wei Wuxian uses the fact that Mo Xuanyu was a cat slave, or he was a widely known gay man, or that sounded wrong. He was someone who everybody knew that he was gay. So what he did is pretend that he actually had a crush on Lan Wangji and that he really liked him. Now, he thought that this was going to make Lan Wangji disgusted and was going to reject it, so he wouldn't take it back to Cloud Recesses. But we know a thing or two about Lan Wangji, so we know that this backfired incredibly. This, if something, made him want to take him to Cloud Recesses even more. Because Lan Wangji did recognize Wei Wuxian. He did knew that was Wei Wuxian in Mo Xuanyu's body. Like, he didn't know Mo Xuanyu, but he definitely knew that Wei Wuxian was in there. So in the end, he does take him. He does take Wei Wuxian to Cloud Recesses. And at this stage, what we have to know about Wei Wuxian is that he has always been a little bit of a gremlin. I would say that is one of his main characteristics. Wei Wuxian, he's just that. He's a gremlin type of character. But in his previous life, he was more contained. I have the feeling he was more constrained, maybe because of his, his story, his situation, his trauma, whatever it is. He wasn't as much of a gremlin as he is now. I'm assuming, at least I'm basing myself on the Untamed. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe in the novel he's even more of a gremlin, and I will be very pleasantly surprised. But in this case, he's going full gremlin. Like, he's going from 0 to 100. Well, not from 0. He was never a 0. But he's going from a 75 to 100. Because he has the theory that if he outrages the people of Cloud Recesses enough, they're going to throw him out. And that's what he wants. He wants to go away. We know that would never happen. We know that Lan Wangji would never allow him to be thrown away, but that's what he believes. So he starts behaving in an outrageous way with Lan Wangji, with the juniors. He makes a lot of comments. It's a whole thing. And at the end of the day, Lan Wangji takes him to his bedroom to sleep. And obviously, Wei Wuxian, being who he is, wants to going to outrage even further Lan Wangji. So he continues doing that. He makes some, comments about sharing the bed and that he's not going to be able to stop himself, things like that. And this doesn't make Lan Wangji disgusted like he, assumed. Actually, he's not receiving any kind of, reaction from Lan Wangji, and this surprises him because Lan Wangji, what he does is just paralyze him and use him as a blanket, like just let him lie over him, and that's it. that's his solution. And again, Wei Wuxian is shocked at this. He's shocked because he starts to remember what Lan Wangji was. And here we have the Cloud Recesses arc. We have the whole arc when Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian studied together at Cloud Recesses years ago. And he remembers Lan Wangji being someone who was very easy to wind up. So this new Lan Wangji is something that he's not used to. Obviously, for us who have already watched, or at least for me who have already watched the Untamed, and I know what's happening with Lan Wangji, we can tell, we know what's happening. We know the source of this change in Lan Wangji. And also because he's older, maybe he's not the same like he was as a teenager. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much where we are when we start chapter 19. We have the end of Wei Wuxian thinking about his time at Cloud Recesses when he was a teenager, and he's still, paralyzed on top of Lan Wangji. And so now let's go to the events of chapter 19. Surprisingly, Wei Wuxian didn't have a good night after spending the whole night sleeping on Lan Wangji. And he spent half of the night thinking, like, what the hell happened to Lang Wangji? Like, why was he so different from what he remembered? Why wasn't he getting the reactions that he was expected? And the other half of the night, he actually slept. When he woke up, he was in what he describes as a well-behaved position. And I think it's understood that Lang Wangji put him in that position, like he just arranged him like a doll. I think that's what it's understood. But Lang Wangji is not there; he has gone, and he's alone in the bedroom. And at this stage, essentially, Wei Wuxian is freaking out about what had happened the night before, and especially Lang Wangji's behavior. So he's in the middle of losing his mind when he hears a knock, and it's none other than Lan Zixue coming to check if he's awake. And Wei Wuxian expresses his surprise at being called so early in the morning. And Lan Zixue is confused by this because he, actually doesn't consider 9 in the morning early. And I felt a little bit attacked by that because I do consider it early. But I guess we have very different lives. And obviously the Lans wake up at 5, so that is quite a different. They have different standards. Apparently, so does Wei Wuxian. It says that he goes to bed at 1 and he wakes up at 9 generally. So that sounds pretty reasonable to me. Actually, I would say that that's a lot better than I do. I never go to bed at 1. I go to bed much, much later. But as you can imagine, my standards are much, much lower. And one of the things that I find interesting here is this difference between the sex attitudes towards these things. Because obviously we know that the Lans have a lot of rules and they are a lot more strict. So I think it's clear that maybe other sects were a lot more lax and a lot more relaxed in certain things. Like probably in Lotus Pier, this is the routine that he had when he was in Lotus Pier. And he probably, that was fine. That was waking up at 9 and do something that is already fine. Substandard for the Lans though. Now, Wei Wuxian starts to complain that his waist and back was hurting. And the reason for this is that because, he's left paralyzed and in a very, fixed position. So that's why. But he tells Lan Zixue that because of this, he can't get up. Now, the moment he said this, I said, yeah, I knew where this is going. I know what's going to happen. That little shit, he's going to be a little shit about it. That's what's going to happen. And he doesn't disappoint because poor, sweet, naive Lan Zixue, who fell hook, line, and sinker for this line and ends up asking, like, Wei Wuxian, what was wrong? This was a huge mistake because Wei Wuxian, who we already know is a massive gremlin and who's on a mission to outrage everybody in Cloud Recesses and get thrown out of his ass, he has the goal to tell Lan Zixue that the reason he can move is because Lang Wangji has done him the whole night. That's right. He tells Lan Zixue, who is, we know that is not necessarily, but, and obviously we don't know at this stage of the story, but we know what's happening. Lan Zixue, who is we can call him the adoptive son of Lang Wangji, who up to a few days ago, he had a perfectly normal adoptive father who never did anything crazy like this, who behaved in a manner that is very correct and a manner that is very, formal, and how Lang Wangji is. And then one day, your dad meets this weirdo in a night hunt, and he takes him back to his home and sleeps with him in his room, in his bed. That is Lan Zixue's perspective on this. And my God, there is not enough therapy. Like, poor Lan Zixue, let's just pray for him. So, that is what Wei Wuxian answers him. And Jingyi is luckily there because Lan Zixue, I think, is speechless. And Lan Jingyi is not having any of this, and he tells him to stop the nonsense, otherwise he would pay. So he's threatening him. But Wei Wuxian has, he doesn't do things by half. So he tells him that Lang Wangji did do him the whole night and that now he doesn't have the face to see anyone. Again, Wei Wuxian, my God, these poor boys. And yes, my dog is just barking in the background because why not? Why not? I'm not going to stop because I already said once I start, I'm going to continue with this video. So that's his answer. He insists that he cannot do anything because, Lang Wenji has tired him after, having fun all night, let's just say. Now, the thing is that the juniors don't actually have authority to go into Lang Wenji's place, so they only can speak to him from outside the door, with the door shut. So they can actually do anything other than shout. And this, I think, enrages Lang Jingyi even further because there's nothing he can do. And he's trying to defend Lang Wenji's honor because, he's outraged in his behalf. But, if only he knew what's in Lang Wenji's mind. My God, talking about trauma. So I actually find this adorable. I love the juniors and I love how protective they are in Lang Wenji. And I think that says a lot about Lang Wenji and what type of teacher it is and how much these juniors care about him and, about his reputation, how proud they are of him and they don't want his reputation ruined, but how much they care about him. They, it's for them, it's Han Wen-jun. It's, it's like, I don't know. It's just so sweet. So, having done this, having moved from the topic of, Lang Wenji's and Wei Wuxian's activities the previous night, Lang Jingyi also tells him that Wei Wuxian needs to train his donkey because it makes too much noise. And now, this touches the nerve with Wei Wuxian because he actually does care a lot for Little Apple. So, this is what gets him out of the bedroom and outside so he can go check on Little Apple. And it turns out that Little Apple was crying and making noise because he wanted to eat grass. But he couldn't because the grass was covered in bunnies. Talking about first world problems. Like, honestly, I wish that was the problem. I wish my problems was too much bunnies. That sounds adorable. And Wei Wuxian, gremlin instincts came to light once again. His first response to this, at seeing the rabbits, is, how about we eat them? Can we eat them? And Lang Jingyi was once again fuming with anger because apparently several people in Cloud Recesses had complained about Little Apple and he wasn't doing anything about it. He wasn't taking it seriously. Wei Wuxian's solution to this is to give Little Apple his favorite food, which is an apple, of course, and that way it stops making noise. Wei Wuxian now turned his attention back to the bunnies, and he asked the juniors if he could be chased out of Cloud Recesses for eating them. And you can literally see the cogs working inside Wei Wuxian's head. But Lang Jingyi seemed to guess what he was thinking and blocked him, telling him that the bunnies were Lang Wenji's. Now, this made Wei Wuxian laughed so hard that he almost fell to the floor. He realized that these are the same bunnies that came from the ones that he had given Lang Wenji when they were teenagers. And at that time, Lang Wenji had pretended that he didn't want them. But it's evident that he had secretly looked after them and kept them all these years. And for Wei Wuxian, the image of the serious Lang Wenji holding a rabbit proves too much. So that is adorable. That is adorable. I love the fact that Lang Wenji is a big fan of bunnies. However, for Wei Wuxian, this image is ruined when he started to think again back to the previous night, to how Lang Wenji had behaved, and how he had reacted differently to the way he had expected to react. So let's talk a little bit about the bunnies before we move on. I think obviously it's interesting that Lang Wenji not only kept the rabbits, but also it seems that they actually became a plague in Cloud Recesses, because obviously if Little Apple wanted to eat like grass and he couldn't, or she couldn't, I actually don't know if it's a he or she, I don't know if it was said, and it couldn't because it was covered with rabbits. Obviously the problem is big enough that every grass is covered with rabbits. That is a huge problem. But also the fact that the juniors know that they belong to Lang Wenji, and knowing that the lands have a rule that you can't have pets, because clearly if they were rabbits that just live there, if they didn't know that they belong to Lang Wenji, they could just say, oh, these rabbits, they just live here. They are, they made their home here. They don't belong to anybody. They're just, we just leave them live. They let them live there. But they specifically said that the bunnies were Lang Wangji's. So clearly either Lang Wangji just did not care, he was breaking the rules, he had a lot of these rabbits, or maybe he was allowed to. I have the feeling that Lang Wangji is maybe like the baby of the family, so I think he gets away with a lot of shit. And I'm telling this as a big sister who knows that my youngest brother, he gets away with so much. Like things that I would would have gotten away with, he gets away with everything. So I know that the power of the younger sibling is tremendous. So I fully believe that that's the reason. I fully believe that Lan Shiren took one look at Lang Wangji and said, well, guess we have rabbits now. That's how it is. So that's my theory anyway. So going back to the story, at this point, they are there, the rabbits, the donkey, Wei Wuxian, the juniors, and suddenly a bell started to ring on the western side of Cloud Recesses. Lan Jingyi and Lan Xishui stop everything and dash towards the sound, dash towards where the bell was. Wei Wuxian knew something was wrong because definitely this wasn't normal, so he followed them. The bells that were ringing came from this watchtower that was called the Mixi, which was used to summon spirits. So this is what they use it for. Whenever they have to summon a spirit, they did it in this tower. And when the bell rang on its own, it meant that something had gone wrong inside of the tower with the ritual that they were performing. So, when they reached the tower, Lan Xishui, Lan Jingyi, and Wei Wuxian, there was already a crowd gathering there. But nobody dared to go in, or rather, they actually couldn't. It says that the door was shut and it only opened from the inside. And apparently breaking it was forbidden. They couldn't just break the door. Although I would say in an emergency, maybe you should, but that's not my place to say. So, Wei Wuxian looked around and he realized that Lang Wangji wasn't in the crowd. And this gave him a bad feeling because he knew that if Lang Wangji had heard the bells, he would have immediately rushed there. So that can only mean one thing: Lang Wangji had to be inside. Suddenly, the doors burst open and a disciple staggered outside saying that they shouldn't have summoned whatever they have summoned. Immediately, Wei Wuxian started asking questions like what was the spirit they were summoning, who else was inside, and where was Lang Wangji. The disciple tells Wei Wuxian that Lang Wangji had been the one to tell him to run away. But before he could say any more, blood came from his mouth and nose, and yikes. Like, can you imagine you're talking to someone that happened? Ugh. So, Wei Wuxian quickly went into action. He grabbed his flute and he kicked the door of the tower, demanding to be let in. Now, this is very interesting because Wei Wuxian didn't want to get involved. All he wanted was to leave Cloud Recesses and to go away, just to be left alone. He didn't want to get involved with any of the sects or any of the mess that was happening. So it's very interesting that the first hint that he get that Lang Wangji might be in trouble, that's it. That's it for me. He realizes who's inside this place, then I'll have to go in as well. And I don't know. I just found that very, very interesting. So the door ends up opening to let him in, but the moment he steps in, it closes behind him. So a few of the disciples that tried to follow him were shocked that they couldn't enter as well, because they couldn't open the door again. And they start asking, who the hell is this guy? Like, why could he enter? Another interesting thing is that, I assume, why did it open for Wei Wuxian? The only thing that I can assume is that Lang Wangji let him in. Like, Lang Wangji heard him knocking the door and let him in. And I think that talks a lot about how much Lang Wangji trusts and, knows about Wei Wuxian's power. Like, he knows whatever is happening here, I think he can handle it. So he lets him in. It's not like he say, oh no, this is dangerous, so I want you out. I want you out of danger. I think to me, they say, I trust you and I know your power, so you can come in. But at the same time, shouldn't be suspicious for Wei Wuxian that Lang Wangji let him in if he thought it was Mo Xuanyu, because Mo Xuanyu technically wasn't very powerful in terms of cultivation. So I don't know, maybe in that situation he didn't even realize, he was only thinking about getting in and dealing with whatever was inside. But I find that interesting as well. So, as soon as Wei Wuxian enters, he noticed the combination of dark energies, and in the middle of it all was the arm, the one that they have gotten from Mo village. And the arm seems to be pointing in one particular direction. Everyone doing the summoning had either run away or passed out. The only exception was Lang Wangji, and he has his guqin next to him, but he wasn't playing it. The strings were just moving on their own. And maybe this is a particular trick that Lang Wangji can do, or it's just something that, in general, people, the lands can do. I think there is a lot of these type of little details that are never explained, but we can assume that there is a way for him to make the guqin play on its own. Now, Lan Juren was also there, but he had passed out and he was also bleeding. So Wei Wuxian took his place, took his flute out, and started to, show that I'm here to help. So Lang Wangji sees him and understands what he wanted to do. So he raised his hand, and whatever was playing on his guqin stopped playing. And another melody started to come from the guqin, and Wei Wuxian joined it. They started with a song called Evocation, and this didn't seem to work at all. It actually seemed to make things worse. And this is something that actually shocks Wei Wuxian, because he believes that it's almost impossible for him and Lang Wangji to be unable to summon the spirit, because they're both very, very powerful cultivators. He thinks that the only reason this can happen is because the soul was not whole. The soul had been cut apart. And this apparently is something absolutely terrible. Wei Wuxian compared it to his own death, and we don't actually know how he dies, but we know that he was probably torn apart or something like that. It was a very gruesome, horrible death. But Wei Wuxian actually thinks that at least his body was destroyed and not his soul. His soul was actually complete. So he thinks that whatever happened to this soul was even worse than what happened to him, because the soul, it was just cut apart. Now, Lang Wangji changes the song to another one called Rest. Both these songs were actually very famous songs. They were widely known in the cultivation world. So it's not that by playing them, you can actually say, oh, that's Wei Wuxian because he knows this song. These are very common songs, so it's safe for Wei Wuxian to play them and, without having to pretend anything. However, it was known that the Yilin Patriarch played the flute, and his flute playing was actually famous all over the cultivation world. So what he does to hide himself is that he starts to play the flute very badly on purpose. And Lang Wangji noticed this and looked at him with his expressionless Lang Wangji face, but Wei Wuxian continues with his terrible playing. That's his plan. And you have to imagine that Wei Wuxian's playing was so bad that Lan Juren, who was in a coma, actually sat upright, face covered in blood, and shouted at him to stop playing. That is just how powerful, how bad he was actually playing. Lan Juren was completely out of it, but just came back to tell him off. That is, if not typical Lan Juren, I don't know what it is. So sadly, he couldn't even finish to say to stop playing because, he started spatting blood again and going into a coma again. But, Wei Wuxian got the gist of what he was trying to say. However, he didn't care because regardless of whether he was playing good or bad, the song was working. It was functioning anyway. And it worked. It seemed to calm this, resentful energy. The moment the song ends, the door opens and the juniors just pile in, calling Lang Wangji. Again, adorable, like little ducks. And Lang Wangji goes to treat his ankle while the others dealt with the rest of the wounded. But they were very surprised that nothing they did seemed to revive them. So that should tell you how strong that resentful energy had been. And it says that considering Lan Juren had directed between 800 and 1,000 summonings, even including fierce spirits, seeing how badly this effect was really, really show like how bad, how powerful whatever that was in the arm was. And obviously, I think this is something that it showed a little bit in the Untamed, but not in the same way. Obviously, in the Untamed, we don't have the arm. We have the sword spirit and the sword. But I think it's never shown as being this bad. But I think the same happened in the Mauve village. Obviously, in the Mauve village, we have a lot of death, but definitely not as bad as in the novel. So clearly this is something that is incredibly powerful. And also it speaks how powerful Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian are, that only the two together could take him down. And not to say that Lan Qiren is not powerful, but he's also very old. And I also have the impression that Lan Qiren, although he must be a powerful cultivator, he's someone that's probably more dedicated to academics. So, being powerful, yes, but I would say that Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian are probably the two most powerful cultivators, at least in this world, at this stage. So, here we are, we cannot wake them up, they are taken away, and Wei Wuxian saw that Lan Zixue, he wasn't feeling well, he had a downcast expression, and Wei Wuxian went to ask him, what's wrong, what's happening? And Lan Zixue says that he feels guilty because it seemed to him that the arm was coming after them. And this is a little bit complicated to explain. But essentially he talks about when they were in the Mauve village, he was talking about the spirit attraction flags that they were using in the Mauve village, and those spirit attraction flags could only attract things at 250 meters away. So that is not a lot. That is a radius of 250 meters. That is not a lot of space. So what he says is that either the arm had to have already been there because it couldn't have been summoned for farther away. But if that was the case, the arm had already been there, then by the time they arrived, it would have destroyed the whole village, considering how vicious it was. So the only explanation was that someone had to have put it there for some evil purpose. And Wei Wuxian is very impressed by this. He's very impressed by this logic. But he tells him, it's not your fault, because Lan Zixue believes that they are responsible for the lives that they were lost at Mauve village and for Lan Qiren and the rest of the disciples. And I think this is so... I really like that. I really like this Lan Zixue realizing that someone set the arm free on purpose. His logic really was great. I think that it's very impressive, and you can really tell that he's going to be not only a very good cultivator, he has a brain, he can think. And Wei Wuxian is also very impressed. And Wei Wuxian tried to console Lan Zixue, telling him that something can just be beyond his control. There was nothing that he could do about that. And also, it's not like the arm was coming for them necessarily, not for the juniors, but probably more for Wei Wuxian and, to some extent also Lan Wangji. So, at least we know that. But obviously, there is no point in him feeling guilty because it's really not their fault. Now, Lan Wangji says that now they have to trace the arm to its source. And Wei Wuxian explains that finding the full force and understanding, who he is could possibly be a way to save them, to save this spirit. So, I really love this, teaming up to explain things to the juniors. I love how much Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian complement each other, especially when they deal with the juniors. And the juniors and them is probably one of my favorite parts of the present arc in the story. So, Lan Jingyi, who had realized that Wei Wuxian was probably right in what he was saying, but he was still angry because everything that had happened with him, still asked him, how to do it? How are you supposed to do that? At least, how can you trace the arm to its source? And Lan Wangji answers just saying northwest, because again, he's usually so chatty about it. You could have added a few more words, Lan Wangji, but he just said northwest. And when the juniors ask him how he knows, how do you know that you have to go northwest, Wei Wuxian explains that the arm itself showed them by pointing in that direction. And he says that the arm is either pointing at other parts of his body or at his murderer. Lan Wangji tells his disciples to take care of his uncle and the rest of the disciples, and they ask if he's going down the mountain. And Wei Wuxian to this answers, and this is a quote, "Yes, yes, yes, we can finally get off the mountain and elope together." Wei Wuxian, this is not the place, this is not the time. We are in the middle of a crisis here. This, unsurprisingly, made everyone uncomfortable. Even Lan Chiren, who was in a coma, sensed some shenanigans going on around him, and he twitched. He didn't wake up. The disciples actually thought that if Wei Wuxian kept going, he would have angered Lan Chiren awake again. But he didn't. Luckily, he stopped there. And that is actually the ending of chapter 19. There are two things that I found interesting in this. First of all, the fact that Wei Wuxian obviously still doesn't know that Lan Wangji knows who he is. And this is interesting. In the Untamed, he finds out pretty much right away, like from the moment he goes to Cloud Recesses, he knows that he was recognized. And I'm going to talk about this a lot later when I finish the chapters. I have a theory as to why, but we are going to talk about that later. The other thing that I found very, very, very interesting is that supposedly Wei Wuxian was acting gay for the sake of being thrown out of the mountain. But once he finds out that he's going to go down it, like he's going to leave Cloud Recesses, he's still doing. He's still messing them up. Like he's still saying, "Oh, I'm going to elope with him." Obviously, that could be Wei Wuxian being a gremlin and just liking to tease the juniors. Let's say let's call it teasing. However, I think there's also maybe he doesn't realize how much he's actually liking this pretense. I don't know. I think maybe, Wei Wuxian should just look inside of himself, just think about the things that he had done and the things that he has said. This reminds me, is not the same. And I think I already did this comparison, but I don't know if you have seen Arrested Development. We have the characters of Tobias, who is always saying accidentally gay things. And everybody thinks that he's gay and that he doesn't realize that he is. And he's always saying things. And one of the things he said is I wish you would record yourself and hear the things that he says. Because he's always kind of making innuendos and things like that. So that's what I wish. I wish maybe Wei Wuxian does realize what he says because he's saying it on purpose. But I wish he would analyze why. Why are you saying these things? What's happening? Wei Wuxian, what's happening? A lot. We already know that it's a lot. Okay, so that is the end of chapter 19. So, chapter 20. We start the chapter being told that although other cultivators prefer to go night hunting surrounded by other people, other disciples, and things like that, Lan Wangji preferred going alone, especially this time considering how dangerous the arm had proven to be. And I think that, again, says a lot about Lan Wangji as a person. Obviously, he's someone that doesn't like to maybe socialize with others and doesn't have a lot of people, but he just doesn't want to put other people in danger. He believes he can do it. And again, that tells a lot about his character. For his part, Wei Wuxian had originally planned to escape, obviously going down the mountain that should have more opportunities to do so. But every time he had tried, Lan Wangji essentially caught him by the collar like a little kitten and brought him back. So he switched strategies and went back to his plastering himself to Lan Wangji in the hopes of disgusting him. However, Lan Wangji stood his ground. And I'm surprised he keeps with this strategy considering he knows it doesn't affect Lan Wangji and maybe he likes it a little bit. So I don't know how much he's using this strategy to get rid of Lan Wangji. But let's move on. Wei Wuxian complained how much less fun was to tease Lan Wangji now. In the past, his reaction would have been amusing, but now he remains unmoved, and he can't understand it. And Wei Wuxian spends a lot of time concerned about the fact that Lan Wangji changed, and Lan Wangji is different doesn't react the way he thinks. And I think, and this is a theory, obviously, I don't know. I think what bothers him is that it shows that maybe he doesn't know Lan Wangji as much as he thinks he does. I feel like maybe when they were in Cloud Recesses together, when they were younger, he assumed that he understood Lan Wangji pretty well, that he had it figured out. And now it turns out that there is a lot that he doesn't know about Lan Wangji. And I don't know, I think that bothers him a little bit. Okay, so let's continue. That is my theory. I don't know. So this is how they follow the arm to this small city in Qinghe. where our heroes meet with a charlatan selling cosmetics, and Wei Wuxian show interest in buying some rouge, because we know that was Motion Yu thing. He liked to wear makeup. Wei Wuxian had washed the makeup off his face in a previous chapter, but who knows, maybe he'll get it back. By then, the charlatan find out it was for him, not like he was not buying, some rouge from a girlfriend or wife, whatever, but he was buying for him. And he didn't know how to react. Luckily, Lang Wenjin intervenes, and we get a very interesting description of Lang Wenji from the point of view of the charlatan. So he says, this man was extremely handsome, his robes and forehead ribbon whiter than snow. The appearance of Lang Wenji spooks the charlatan and runs away, not wanting to get in trouble with Lan. Now, with his interaction with the charlatan, the topic of money came up, since Wei Wuxian complained that the charlatan had run off before he could buy from him. With Lang Wenji asked him if he even had money, like, how are you planning to buy anything? Lang Wenji knows that he doesn't have any. And this is it. Here we have the birth of sugar baby Wei Wuxian, because the moment he extended his hand just to, maybe get some money, and maybe to tease him, like to tease Lang Wenji, like, look, I don't have any money, maybe you can give me some. He didn't expect to get any, but Lang Wenji gave him a full pouch of money like it was nothing. Like, we needed more confirmation of how whipped Lang Wenji is for him. So now Wei Wuxian has this full pouch of money, and we know that the lands are loaded, they are rich, so we know that pouch is full of money. Now, once again, Wei Wuxian expresses confusion at how different Lang Wenji was in comparison to the past. Like, the younger Lang Wenji would have never do this. But considering his behavior for the previous days, Wei Wuxian doesn't even find it strange anymore. He just takes the pouch. Like, he just accept it. Like, this is the new way, Lang Wenji. And there has been 13 years. Like, 13 years as an adult is a long time. Maybe he did change. Although we know why this is happening. He even says that if it wasn't for the fact that he knew about Lang Wenji's integrity and goodness, he would have suspected him and Mo Xuanyu to have been in a relationship. Again, that is where his mind goes immediately. Like, this is the only explanation. But obviously he knows that it couldn't have happened. Not that I feel that, being gay and being in a relationship with men has anything to do with integrity and goodness, but we already know that I think Wei Wuxian had a lot of, internalized homophobia because of the society they live. I mean, being gay is something that is generally not accepted in this world. Like, it exists and it's there, but it's generally not accepted. Especially, I remember Chang Cheng also reacted very badly towards it. Like, he was actually disgusted. And it makes sense that Wei Wuxian would expect Lang Wenji to be disgusted as well. But clearly, he doesn't know everything. But definitely it makes sense that there is something internalized that for Wei Wuxian that, he still haven't accept. Obviously, he doesn't even, the fact of accepting his own, that is like in another galaxy, but not even to the point of, changing his mind about the way he sees, being gay. I think, there is a lot to deal with there. And he thinks, the reason why he thinks this is because what other reason could he have to act that way? And I feel like at this point, we should just look at the camera like Jim in The Office, but no comment, no further comment other than that. So they keep walking, or at least Wei Wuxian does, and he soon noticed that he had left Lang Wenji behind because he was standing looking at something. And Wei Wuxian felt that he should slow down because he shouldn't leave Lang Wenji like that. And again, this is interesting because hadn't he been trying to escape and now he doesn't want to leave Lang Wenji? I don't know. That's when someone started shouting about the Yilin Patriarch, which obviously catches his attention and startles Wei Wuxian, quite understandably. So obviously he has to go and check what was up with that. And what was up with that was that the same fake cultivator, the same charlatan from before, this time he was selling portraits of a malicious-looking man. And who could that malicious-looking man be but none other than the Yilin patriarch himself? Apparently his portraits could be used to protect people from evil energy, I guess. You can just plaster them in your house and you were protected. Wei Wuxian, as you can imagine, didn't take this very well. He argued that Wei Wuxian was a man famous for his good looks. But before the man could reply, someone kicked the charlatan, like right in the chest. And that someone happened to be the angry ball of white peonies that is Jingling. Not to be confused with Ling Jing, who is a character from Guardian, created especially to fuck with me every time that I have to say one of the two characters and make me think twice. So thank you for that. Jingling says that he kicked him because he has said the name of Wei Wuxian out loud. And this is the charlatan. The charlatan has mentioned Wei Wuxian. And we can only assume that this gremlin of a boy goes around kicking people left and right whenever Wei Wuxian is mentioned. But to be fair, though, I mean, I don't think a lot of people goes around mentioning the name of Wei Wuxian. And actually, I don't think in this case he wasn't even mentioning about the charlatan. It was actually mentioned for Wei Wuxian. But it doesn't matter. Anyway, because of Jingling's clothes, it looks like he's from a rich and important family, and the charlatan doesn't say anything because, how can you complain about this behavior from someone who can pretty much bring all his friends and kill you, I guess? These powerful sects, they have a lot of power, so it's not that they can do anything. And if you're someone important in that sect, forget about it. Apparently, you can do whatever you like. Wei Wuxian, though, he doesn't have such reservations. And he realizes that Jingling takes after his father and uncle, and the worst part of his father and uncle, but not his mother. So he decides to do some tinkering. And I'm thinking about Jingling's upbringing here a little bit, because obviously his status meant that not a lot of people could exercise any influence on him, except for Chang Cheng and Jingun Zhao. And the way they did it, I think, was very different from very different reasons. I'm going to focus more now in Chang Cheng because obviously I don't know how the relationship between Jingling and Jingun Zhao is in this universe, or not in this universe, in the book specifically. But I feel like Chang Cheng felt guilty about the death of his sister, so, and his nephew being an orphan. So I think he let him get away with a lot. Obviously he told him off and he treated him a little bit not great. But on the other hand, he let him get away with a lot of things. I remember when we were in the night hunt in Phoenix Mountain, I said like that, like I was there. Do you remember when we were there and then, in the Phoenix Mountain? I was right there. I saw the whole thing. He actually got people to stop other cultivators from, winning so Jingling would win. So clearly he gets away with behaviors that, maybe he shouldn't. And he's so isolated from people that he doesn't have anyone else to maybe correct this behavior. And I think, Wei Wuxian, I think, probably notices the same. So he's going to do some tinkering with Jingling. And Jingling was definitely not happy to see Mo Xuanyu, especially after Wei Wuxian, obviously Wei Wuxian in Mo Xuanyu's body, reminding him of their previous meeting in which he forced him to the ground while he was laughing. I remember that he got a fat ghost to sit on him, so that was something. That was something that happened. But all Jingling did was whistle. And at first, Wei Wuxian was confused, why is this guy whistling? But soon he could hear what is described in the text as the heavy huffs and puffs of a beast. When he turned, he saw a huge black spiritual dog running towards him. And he was impressive enough that everyone on the stream was crying in fear. And I absolutely love this fairy's description. She's described as a huge beast that people scream in fear when they saw coming. Such a contrast with the one in the Untamed, who is the most adorable, friendly dog, and obviously much smaller. But I remember when we get this, and that was obviously an unintentional funny moment in the Untamed, or maybe not unintentional, maybe they did it on purpose. The fact that they show Wei Wuxian being absolutely scared with the music and everything, and they cut from Fairy just happily making his way down the street, he literally looks like the friendliest of dogs. Like, that dog looks like a fairy. And now it makes more sense. Like, why would Jingling call that beast fairy? But, it's his dog. He can do whatever he likes. But I don't know. I love it. I love it. I love that in the book it's actually an impressive dog, and in the Untamed it's just a fat, cute dog. I don't know. So, in regards to this dog, there is a note about spiritual dogs saying that these dogs are trained to gain near human intelligence. I don't think this is something that is explicitly explained in the show. Definitely, we know that it's a spiritual dog, so it's a special dog, but this idea that they are more intelligent and they have near human intelligence, I don't think it was necessarily mentioned. So that was very interesting. Now, Wei Wuxian saw this dog coming down the street, and very reasonably, because apparently this dog is huge, he flees, he runs away, and he's terrified. And here we get a bit of backstory about why. And essentially, before being taken by Shang Fengmian, Wei Wuxian had lived in the streets, and there he had to fight with wild dogs for food. So he ended up developing a phobia for them. And an interesting tidbit that we get mentioned here is that Chang Chen actually found this hilarious, apparently. Like, he found it funny that he was so afraid of dogs, and that very few people actually knew about Wei Wuxian's fear because he was embarrassed about it. So, Chang Cheng, little bit of a dick for finding Wei Wuxian's phobia funny. Like, I know he was young, at least if it happened, like, at the same time of the Untamed, wait, let me rearrange my thought. If this happened at the same time that it was shown from the Untamed, also Zheng Chan had to get rid of his own dog so Wei Wuxian could stay, so maybe he was also a little bit resentful for that. But still, like, laughing at somebody else's phobia, especially when you can see that they are terrified, I don't know, a little bit of a dick move. So, being terrified by the appearance of the dog, Wei Wuxian called for his saviors, and who else could it be but Lang Wenji? And Jingling is surprised to see Mo Xuanyu with Lang Wenji again. Apparently, Lang Wenji is someone who even made his peers nervous, and his level of intimidation was worse than even Lan Qiren's, and that is saying something. And since Fairy was so smart because it has near human intelligence, he soon realizes that he couldn't be rude in front of Lang Wenji, so he just howled and hid behind Jingling. And I know this, that Lang Wenji had become so intimidating and so good at making people nervous. And I think, to be fair, I think the reason for this is that he has a complete different strategy, because I think Lan Qiren, people are afraid of him because he gets angry and is going to tell you off. But I think the thing about Lang Wenji is that he probably doesn't say anything. He just looks at you. And I think that is even more terrifying. So I think that's perhaps why he is more intimidating. And what we know about this dog is that it was a rare species, and it was given by Jingling by Jingun Zhao. And when people found out about this, they didn't dare to say anything. So obviously the dog could do whatever they like, because people knew that it was being given to him by Jingun Zhao, who was an important figure. Lang Wenji, however, was not most people, so he actually didn't give a shit. Jingling, who seemed to be afraid of Lang Wenji, thought that he was going to kill Fairy and then give Jingling a harsh beating. However, we'll never find out if it was actually possible, because after one look at Lang Wenji, Wei Wuxian decided to climb him like a pole. He was up there the minute. And Lang Wenji understandably froze. Like, he found himself, with a body full of Wei Wuxian. So that was very shocking for him. And Jing Li saw his opportunity to leave the fuck out. Very wise indeed. The charlatan was trying to get up as he complained about the moral degeneration of the world, and Wei Wuxian, now dog-free, agreed with him. He said, you know what, you're right. The charlatan evidently regarded Wei Wuxian as his savior in this situation, even though he did pretty much nothing, so he gifted him with a stack of Yilin Patriarch evil suppressing portraits. What a price! And then gave him tips to be able to make a profit with them. Lang Wenji looked at the scary face hung, and this is how it's described. This is an actual quote of the book. It's described as the Yilin Patriarch in this portrait is described as a scary face hunk, a hunk. He's described as a hunk. I have no words. And said nothing. So, unlike Wei Wuxian, who had a bit to say, Wei Wuxian, boy, did he had a bit to say. So mainly he asked the charlatan about strange things happening around. So we just go to the main thing because, my God, he complained about it. And he also sneaks a request to draw the reeling patriarch a little bit prettier. And the charlatan, who apparently is known as the know-it-all of Qinghe, mentions a man-eating rich called Jinglu Rich. I think that is how it's pronounced. And that is the end of chapter 20, which I think it was a little bit shorter than the other one. So let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about a ridge, because I actually had to look for the meaning of the word, and because I have no idea what a ridge is. I have never seen that word in my life. And apparently it says, according to Cambridge Dictionary, it's a raised part of the Earth's surface much larger than a hill, the top of which might be covered in snow. And first, let me tell you, I have seen photos of it, and I have to confess, I still have no idea what a ridge is. If I've seen a ridge in a mountain, I've never realized. I have no idea. I think it's like a mountain. That's the closest thing that I can get. And also, Cambridge Dictionary considers this A2 word, which it means that it's for elementary students, which is like, what? Intermediate students, like a ridge. What are they thinking? I think it's also interesting to point out again that Wei Wuxian could have escaped at any point at this, but it didn't. Obviously, he says that whenever he tried to escape, Lang Wangji brought him back, but that moment where he was leaving behind Lang Wangji and he actually came back for him, how much does he want to live anyway? And that's pretty much it. That is the end of chapter 20. So let's continue with chapter 21. And chapter 21 continues where we left off in chapter 20. So Wei Wuxian is interrogating this charlatan to find out more about this man-eating ridge. And essentially, Wei Wuxian was not impressed by this story considering his past experience, because obviously we know how much Wei Wuxian know about this type of thing. But the charlatan continues to tell him that everyone who had gone to this place has never come back, which obviously Wei Wuxian questions, since there are no survivors and no corpses left behind. How can we know what actually happened? In any case, Wei Wuxian tries to get more information, but the charlatan doesn't have any more to give. So Wei Wuxian moves from this and starts asking him why the Ni sect didn't do anything about this issue, considering that this was Qinghe, this was their territory. And the charlatan said that in the past, with the previous sect leader, they would have wasted no time in doing anything. But now the sect leader was the head shaker. And then we got a little bit of information on Ni Mingyue, who we know was the sect leader of the Nis before Wei Wuxian's death. So what we know about him is this. His dad was, and get this, outraged to death by Wen Ruhan. That was his cause of death. He was outraged to death. He became sect leader at 20. He had been in a sworn brotherhood with Lan Xishen and Jing Wenzhao. He had become very prominent after the Sunshot campaign. He had died publicly of qi deviation, and he must have been succeeded by his younger brother Ni Huasan. Now, this is a lot of interesting information about Ni Mingyue. I knew he had become sect leader very young, and I knew that Wan Ruhan had been involved in his death, but I had no idea that outrage to death was the cause of death. Like, logically, I know it's because of the tendency of the Nis to suffer qi deviation, but my brain, I can't help thinking that when Ruhan just did something so outrageous that Ni Mingjue's father just dropped dead when he found out. Like, what did he do? And then drop dead. That's what I'm imagining. That's the image that I have. I mean, outrage to that? How? I mean, how else are you? How? I'm guessing that, yes, I know that Qinghe, which is the Ni territory, is very close to what was the Wen territory. So there was a lot of disputes between them, and that's probably the reason. But I'm staying with outrage there. I think Wen Ruhan he did something. He did something that outraged him. Also, I understood. I'm not sure from where that Ni Huasan was actually Ni Mingjue's half-brother, not his full brother. But I don't know if it's just something that I read in a story and that's it, or if it's something that maybe we're going to find later, or it's actually the reality. I'm not sure. But I don't know why I was very certain that it was his half-brother. Maybe something from the Untamed? I don't know. In any case, Wei Wuxian asks about the sect leader being called the head shaker, and the charlatan explains that it was because every time people asked him something, he would shake his head and say that he didn't know and was too scared of saying anything. This prompts Wei Wuxian to think back to his time as a student with Nihua-san, and according to him, Nihua-san was the kind of person who wasn't clever but talented in other areas, like painting fans and things like that. His brother had found this frustrating and was very strict to him, although this didn't actually help him improve. Now, as an adult and alone, he was troubled by affairs and often asked help from his brother's sworn brothers, so Lan Xishen and Xingun Xiao. And I think here we have another example of the narrator of the story switching from Wei Wuxian's perspective to a more omniscient one, since the last paragraph explains things like Nihua-san, like the relationship between Nihua-san, Lan Xishen, and Jingun Zhao at this stage, like in the present, that I don't think Wei Wuxian would have been able to know. Like, if he didn't know that Ni Minjue was dead, clearly he didn't know Nihua-san's relationship with the other two and how he asked for help to them. So it's clear that the narrative point of view is not fixed. Although many people actually think that, or actually claim that the story is told from Wei Wuxian's perspective, the truth is that it's always switching. It switched from Wei Wuxian to other characters to maybe a more omniscient type of narration. And that is fine, but it's just, we have to understand that because people believe that, oh, this is told from his perspective, like we only get in his point of view. No, actually, we get in a lot of point of view. I would say that Wei Wuxian is probably the most prominent because we also follow him in the story, but that not necessarily means that everything is told from his perspective or his point of view. As for Nihua-san, I've seen some people have the idea that Nihua-san had always been this manipulative bitch who had been hiding all the time his real intellect just to get the upper hand, and even as a teen he was doing this. And I don't agree with that. I think simply he had no talent as a cultivator. I think it's said that he's a weak cultivator, probably because he wasn't interested. He wasn't interested in developing that aspect. And in a society that prizes cultivation about everything else, I think it makes sense that people will regard him as less and as weak. In addition, I just think that he wasn't interested in doing anything but his own thing. So even though he maybe could have applied his brain, his intellect to cultivation and maybe had been a better cultivator, he didn't bother because he just wasn't into it. He was interested in painting fans, in poetry, in things like that. And I think, yes, he has always been smart, but only after his brother's death did he have to apply his brain to something else. So, I don't know. I think some people also read that maybe the reason he didn't want to, be a cultivator was because of this thing that happens in his family, like this curse that if you practice this type of cultivation you're going to die young. But I don't know, I just think he was lazy. I don't think there's no more explanation to give. I think he was lazy. He didn't want to do things he didn't want to study. He wanted to do the things that he liked, and that's the only explanation I have for Nihua-san. But that is just my opinion, I think. So after Wei Wuxian finished interrogating the charlatan, he bought some of that rouge that he wanted and went back to Lang Wenji, who was still waiting. And since he didn't seem like he was going to ask for the bunny pouch bag, he just kept it. It's his now. So again, sugar baby Wei Wuxian. That's all we have to say. Wei Wuxian and Lang Wenji went to this thing called I'm reading my notes and I wrote Jingli Ridge, but I think it's Jinglu Ridge. Although Wei Wuxian thought the charlatan was probably exaggerating, he actually didn't believe that there was anything there. On the way to this place, they actually found a low-level group of corpses. Apparently, these were so pathetic that were even bullied among their peers and could be easily kicked and outrun by regular people. Like, you didn't even need to be a cultivator, and even if they caught you, like, you wouldn't even die. Like, they were just pathetic. This poor group of course is just pathetic. This means that during night hunts, they usually were ignored by the cultivators, and they were something that the juniors would deal with. And who knew there was actually a hierarchy among walking corpses? And this, obviously, they were at the bottom. When Wei Wuxian saw the corpses, he realized something was going to go wrong, so he hid behind Lang Wangji. This turned out to be a good idea because the corpses took one look at him and turned around to retreat, going slightly faster than they were going, and they were going pretty slow. And because he's a little shit, Wei Wuxian told Lang Wangji, and I quote, "Wow, Han Wenjun, you are so cool. They were so scared when they saw you that they ran away at once." And this, of course, Lang Wangji was speechless because he realized the real reason why they ran away. And first of all, I didn't realize, like, corpses just didn't attack him because it was the Yilin Patcher, I guess, because they sense the energy in him. This is something that I didn't know, and I'm finding out now. The other thing is that I'm not going to give any spoilers because, I don't want to spoil anybody who hasn't seen Heaven Official's Blessing, so I'm not going to give details, but I found this scene very similar to the one in that show. If you have seen it, I think you know the one I'm talking about. If not, then watch that show because it's really fun. There's also my reaction to it that you can also watch here in my channel. Also, I keep forgetting that supposedly Lang Wangji doesn't know Mo Xuan's Wei Wuxian. To me, again, because of the Untamed, because obviously he knows at this stage, I just assume that he does, but I just keep forgetting that Wei Wuxian have to keep pretending, and wonder when that's going to come to light. I have a theory when that could be, at least based on the Untamed, or the situations that I know happen in the Untamed. So, maybe that's not the most reliable thing to do, but we'll see. I have some theory. We'll see what happens. After this, Wei Wuxian decided that the whole man-eating thing was probably an exaggeration and pushed Lang Wangji to go back. However, as they were going, they heard the distant barks of a dog, and suddenly Wei Wuxian was hiding behind Lang Wangji for real. Right away, Lang Wangji recognized Jingling's spiritual dog and says that if it's barking like that, then something must have happened. This makes Wei Wuxian willing to go because he's worried about Jingling, but still terrified though. So he's still behind him. He's still behind Lang Wangji. He tells Lang Wangji to go and see. So, he tells him, let's go and see. But Lang Wangji doesn't move. And Wei Wuxian complains that if he doesn't move, he can't move either, because he's still hiding behind his back. So after a moment of silence, Lang Wangji answers, I quote, "First, let go." And this is pretty cute. The same happens in the Untamed, and it was adorable. I think it's pretty identical to this in the Untamed. And I think there was also an aspect that Lang Wangji was enjoying Wei Wuxian clinging to him a little bit. But, that's between him and himself, I guess. That's for Lang Wangji to know. So the two push and stagger, trying to find the source of the barks. This is when Wei Wuxian finds that there is a maze array there, and this is something that had to be created by a person. Eventually, they figure out how to go through it and find a creepy stone castle in the middle of the forest. And outside the castles, it was Jingling's dog. When he saw them approach, it got close and seemed to indicate towards the castles. And Wei Wuxian, firmly behind Lang Wangji and still terrified, asked where the owner was, since Jingling didn't seem to be anywhere around. Lang Wangji proposed to go inside of the castles, but Wei Wuxian realized that there was no door. Fairy, who in my opinion has started to lose patience with his two stupid humans, beat Wei Wuxian's clothes. It didn't dare to do that from Lang Wangji. Like, I pass on this one. Let's go for the other one. And started tagging him in a certain direction. Wei Wuxian at this moment just almost loses his soul. Like, he almost dies. But, he follows the dog, and he also extends a hand to drag Lang Wangji behind him. And all of this time repeating Langshan, Langshan, Langshan. Which again, you know who he called Langshan. We already know that Wei Wuxian called Lang Wangji Langshan. not Mo Xuanyu. Mo Xuanyu called him Han Wenjun. So again, here in a moment that is in a moment of vulnerability, I think Wei Wuxian didn't realize that maybe he might be revealing himself. But since Lang Wenji already knows, like, doesn't really matter. So the dog drags Wei Wuxian, and Wei Wuxian drags Lang Wenji, and in the back of the castle they find a dark entrance. But this is not an actual entrance, this is just a hole that was made to the castle. And the dog lets go of Wei Wuxian and starts barking in the direction of the entrance. And literally, how much clearer could he be? I think, honestly, Fairy is doing all the work here. My God. And also, I wish I had seen this in the Untamed. In the Untamed, Fairy doesn't appear in this part. I guess it's because it would have been much more difficult to have a dog do this. But still, would you have liked to see it? It would have been adorable. Anyway, it became clear that Jinglin had broken into the castle by force, but something had happened to him. At this moment, Bishen unsheathed itself slightly, and I think in the translation it says that like it unsheathed itself like on its own, but I think it means that Lang Wenji unsheathed it. Like maybe it did it automatically, like he didn't have to physically do it, like he do it with his mind or something like that. But I think, because otherwise we have to assume that Bishen actually, we know that there are spirits also, maybe there is a spirit, but they actually can behave independently. So I don't know, I'm not so sure about that. Anyway, by Bishen unsheathing itself a little, it starts to emit a blue glow that illuminates the path inside of the castle. And both Lang Wenji and Wei Wuxian enters, with Lang Wenji having to hold Wei Wuxian's hand because he rushed inside, still scared of the dog. The dog tried to follow, but it seems that there was some kind of force stopping it. And needless to say, Wei Wuxian was actually ecstatic about this. He didn't want any more of the dog, to be honest. So he took his hand away from Lang Wenji's and continues inside. As they went deeper, Wei Wuxian stopped suddenly, pressing his hand on the top of his head, looking pain. And when Lang Wenji asked what was wrong, he just said that it was too loud. But the place was actually dead silent. So even though Wei Wuxian's ears were ringing, surrounded by the sound. So this was very creepy. And again, here in the end, also interested that, Wei Wuxian holds his hand. In that moment, he finds, comfort in Lang Wenji holding his hand. And then when the danger is gone, the dog is gone, oh no, he has to go back to, his whole thing. So again, another interesting chapter. I think Wei Wuxian is, we know that Lang Wenji knows that he's Wei Wuxian, right? But I think if he didn't, he would have discovered it already, because Wei Wuxian is just not very good at covering his tracks. He's just not very good at pretending to be someone else and not giving himself away. So I think that's actually very funny. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 20. Okay, so we move to chapter 22, and we pretty much start the chapter in the same way we left off. We have Wei Wuxian and Lang Wenji, they are inside this castle, and there is this weird noise that is surrounding them, and only Wei Wuxian can hear it. This noise is described in the book as, quote, "It was an ocean of whispers, rustles, and giggles. From in front and behind, above and below, the voices involve both male and female, old and young, loud and quiet." At this stage, Wei Wuxian took the compass of evil from his Chankun bag, and he saw that it was spinning widely. So this was apparently very bad news. This was not great. Wei Wuxian tried calling Jingling, and they had been inside the castle for a while, and they actually haven't seen anybody, and they have received no answer. All the rooms they have entered so far, they have been completely empty. However, they finally found a room that had a black coffin in the middle. And for some reason, Wei Wuxian had felt a strong affinity to this coffin, and he went to it, patted a few times, and said what a nice coffin it was. And as one does when you find a creepy coffin inside of an even creepier castle full of ghost voices, it was perfectly normal. So, standing on each side of the coffin, Lang Wenji and Wei Wuxian share a look, and they essentially take the lid of the coffin. They open it. And this seemed to have been very bad. This was the wrong move to make, because as soon as that thing was open, the noise was even worse. Like, the owners of the voices had been watching all along, and now they disapprove of their actions. And Wei Wuxian was ready to face whatever horror was hiding inside the coffin. However, it was completely empty, except for a long sword. And here I find it interesting that it mentions a long sword, because obviously I know what this is. I know what the castle is and all of that. But it is, I thought at least that there should be called a saber instead of a sword. I think, at least in the Untamed, this distinction was made. I don't remember in the Donghua, but at least in the Untamed, there was a distinction between sword and saber, which it was pretty important for the story. But I don't know if maybe sword and long sword are maybe two different things. That I have no idea. I'm actually have the Seven Seas translation, so maybe I should check what they put in that. So I'll check it, and if I found something interesting, I'm going to put it on the screen somewhere. So anyway, Wei Wuxian find this very strange, as he should, because it is very strange. And Wei Wuxian and Lang Wangji closed the coffin and continue going through the castle. They found other rooms with similar coffins, all with swords inside. And it was clear by the outside of these coffins that they had been placed in different times, because some of them were older, some of them were newer. And, at this point, they had found plenty of coffins, but no jingling. And Wei Wuxian had started to get worried. Noticing this, Lang Wangji took out his guqin and played a few notes. Then he stared at the strings. Suddenly, the strings started moving on their own, and Wei Wuxian recognized this as a technique of inquiry. And this is a Lan technique that apparently is used to communicate with spirits whose identity was unknown. In this technique, if the strings move on their own, it meant that they were communicating with a spirit who would be asked and would answer using the guqin language. And I wonder here how much would people recognize this technique? Like, how much known was the technique known that it was generally recognized? Like, for example, would Mo Xuanyu, the real Mo Xuanyu, recognize this technique? He studied a little bit of cultivation, so would he be able to recognize it? Or is it that Wei Wuxian recognize it because he has more experience, because he has seen it before, etc., etc.? So I don't know. Maybe it's a pretty famous technique, but I do wonder. Also, I found this technique so much more creepy than the other one that Wei Wuxian does to communicate with spirits. He does one that he enters the spirit's memories, and that was fine. I think it's not a spirit. I think he does it with corpses, not necessarily spirits. But that one is fine. But this one with the instrument playing on its own is just too creepy. It's just, I do not like it. Anyway, Wei Wuxian could not speak the guqin language, so he had Lang Wangji as an interpreter, so he asked Lang Wangji to ask what was the place and who had built it. However, regardless of the question, the answer was always, I don't know. And here there is a bit with Wei Wuxian asking the question and Lang Wangji saying, I don't know, as in the answer, but also to make him believe that he didn't know. And this is in the Untamed as well, and I'm so glad that it's also from the original. In this case, it's stated that Wei Wuxian made the connection with the whole joke that he had done with his sword being called whatever, and his reaction was this, quote, touching his nose, he was at loss of words, and although Langshan is so bright, he even learned how to make me speeches. Apparently, I can read today. And I think it's interesting because in the Untamed, he does say it aloud. He does this exactly the same. He touches his nose and he says the same thing exactly, but he said it aloud. I guess because in the Untamed, obviously, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but obviously he already knows that Wei Wuxian is Wei Wuxian, and Lang Wangji, wait, let me order my brain a little bit. Sometimes my mouth is too fast for my brain. Wei Wuxian knows that Lang Wangji knows who he is. So in that case, maybe it makes more sense to say it out loud. because he even learned how to make me speechless, implies that maybe before he didn't, and implies a connection before. In any case, finally, they get lucky and they manage to find out that the spirit they were talking to is a man, or was a man rather, and he confirmed that a boy between 15 and 16 had entered the castle. And when Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji, or rather when Lan Wangji asked him where was the boy, the spirit obviously answered right here, like chills, literal chills. It's like in the horror movie when the cold is coming from inside the house, like horrifying. This clearly confused Wei Wuxian and asked whether the spirit could be lying, but Lan Wangji said that he was there so he could not. And can we just talk about Lan Wangji and his confidence? I think you can say a lot about Lan Wangji, but the guy definitely knows his worth. I can't even dream to have that level of confidence in my skills. He says, I am here so he can't lie. What a guy. Like, I love Lan Wangji. The next questions are, how old was the spirit? A little rude in my opinion, like, why do you need to know this? But, in the long run, it was actually a useful question. And where was he from? And the answer, creepily enough, had been 15 Langlin. And they had been talking to Jingling all along. I do wonder if, Wei Wuxian asked how old was the spirit because he thought it might have been Jingling, because honestly I don't think there is no other reason to ask the spirit like how old he is. And obviously I am a woman over 30. I don't like being asked my age, because I just don't like it. Not because it's not because it bothers me, like people knowing how old I am. It just bothers me, me knowing how old, me reminding myself how old I am. I just don't like it. Anyway, Wei Wuxian focus, and in the middle of all of the other voices, he seems to hear the faint shouts of Jingling. So he confirms that he is actually there in the spirit form. And Lan Wangji continued asking, trying to find his exact position. Using what I can only describe as the cold, warm, hot technique, Wei Wuxian ends up following his directions until he is directed towards a wall. Yep, he was in the walls, like in my worst nightmare. Jingling was buried in the walls. Vision had, just reacted quickly, did a quick work, and the wall just was down very quickly. And soon they managed to find Jingling, who had been buried in the dirt. He started to cough as soon as they unburied him, and he started to breathe. And Wei Wuxian saw that he was still alive, but he thinks that he almost died, or he wouldn't have been able to communicate through inquiry. So it was a very close thing. They got there right on time. When they put Jingling out of the dirt, in an image that the narrator likens to getting a carrot out of the earth, something got stuck on the sword on his back, and it turned out that this was a skeleton, because everything is a fucking nightmare in this place. It seemed that this skeleton had been buried in the same way as Jingling had been buried, so probably it was another victim. They kept digging, because why not? And they found another skeleton nearby. This one, it was actually a corpse, because it wasn't completely, like, it had skin and flesh in it, so it wasn't necessarily a skeleton. It was a corpse. And this one was for a woman. It wasn't standing, it was like squatting down, no, it was like bending down next to a squatting down skeleton that was at his feet. So essentially, there was a lot of skeletons. And then at this point, the noise in Wei Wuxian's ears was deafening. He was almost sure that the inside of the stone castle was packed with human corpses. And on that happy note, the chapter ends, and also the contentment arc. What a way to end. And very appropriate for Halloween. I'm kind of glad that these things don't, like, yes, they did happen in the Untamed, but they were a lot milder than this. I think this would have been a pretty good horror episode of this show. Anyway, that is the end of the contentment arc. So a few things to comment before I finish. First of all, the thing that strikes me the most is just how similar these chapters are to the Untamed, not only in terms of individual scenes, like little moments, like with Wei Wuxian hiding from the dog, or the situation with the charlatan. Like those are very, very, like these are the same scenes pretty much, like no difference. But when it comes to the way the story is being followed as well, so I think, as a whole, they did a lot of changes in the Untamed. I think they added a lot of things, and obviously they have to flesh out a lot of characters, and that means changing a few things. But as a whole, I can see that it's not actually like it has a lot for the original story. So a lot of the scenes are literally the same. There seems to be three aspects that are the most different when it comes to, this one and the adaptation of the Untamed. I think the first one and the most obvious one is the fact that Wei Wuxian is still pretending to be Mo Xuanyu. I think this was probably done in the show. I mean, the way Wei Wuxian comes back in the show is that he comes back to his own body. So I think it would have been more difficult to pretend he's not himself. He would have had to wear the mask for longer, and you have to assume at some point he would have had to take it off and they would realize. So I think in the show, in the Untamed, it's a lot easier to realize that, oh, that's Wei Wuxian, he looks like him, and he's also dressed exactly like Wei Wuxian dressed, and he's doing the same things. So the connection is a lot quicker as opposed to just seeing someone, and he maybe have some characteristics of Wei Wuxian, but he's not necessarily someone who looks like him. So I think probably that's the reason. I also think that the show have to go harder in creating a clear bond between Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji, since earlier in the episodes. I think at least in the book, I think it can get away with not having like them being a lot closer than they are for a lot earlier, simply because we know how it ends. We know that at the end you will have, the most satisfying ending. But in this case, I feel like because they know that they won't be able to have a more explicit ending between the two, I think they have to compensate by showing a lot more the bond between Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji as being close to each other. And I think that can only be done by Wei Wuxian being Wei Wuxian and not Mo Xuanyu. Like from the first moment that he wakes up, here when he wakes up is, like the whole situation in Cloud Recesses is pretty funny, like until we get to the moment of the, the bell ringing and all of that. The whole sequence of events is pretty funny. Like he's essentially trolling the juniors. He's, just doing shit, it's not very serious. However, if you see the scenes in the Untamed when Wei Wuxian is back to Cloud Recesses, when Lan Wangji takes him to Cloud Recesses, it's pretty, I wouldn't say depressing, but the tone is a lot, sadder. The whole conversation that they have when he wakes up, him walking and seeing like his memories there, and all of the people that had died that he won't see again, and the different relationships they had with them, like with Chang Chang. So obviously this is a lot more emotional. So I think that has to be built. So at the end, there will be no doubt, oh, this is a relationship between them, because they share an emotional bond. In this case, because we'll know the, let's say the consummation of the relationship is going to be more evident, I feel like they can get away with extending like this sort of thing, like not making them closer from this stage. That is my theory anyway. Obviously, I haven't read the whole book, so I don't know. People who have can probably correct me in this sense. The other thing that obviously is very different is the gay stuff that is completely gone, even from like Mo Xuanyu being one, like in the show that doesn't happen at all. He doesn't even wear makeup or anything like that. And clearly, Lan Wangji, not Lan Wangji, Wei Wuxian throwing himself as Lan Wangji, that's definitely not something that happens in the book. It happens in the Donghua Road, or at least it's a lot closer in the Donghua than would happen in the Untamed. But in the Untamed, that is completely obliterated. It doesn't exist. The other thing is that they obviously in the Untamed they downplay the extent of the horror, especially when it comes to Wei Wuxian's powers and also with things that happen around it. I think this is something that I have already mentioned. And I think I'm not sure if the reason why they do this is to make him maybe a more palatable protagonist, like a less. I don't like calling Wei Wuxian gray. Let me get that out of the way. At least of what I know. Maybe I will change my mind here, but everything that I've read about him and everything that I've seen about him, nothing has led me to believe that he's actually a morally grey character. I think he's a character that actually he has his morals and he follows them. Like, that is actually one of his things. Like, he is willing to stand for what he believes. So I don't believe that he's a morally great character. But I do think sometimes he has powers that people will find less than palatable, that people would find his powers and the things that he does like disgusting and horrible. So that is, I think, what makes it maybe something of a less palatable protagonist, that his powers are pretty horrifying. And that's just the way it is. So I suspect that I'll be talking a lot more about this as I advance in the book, so I won't say any more. But I suspect that's probably one of the reasons why they tone down this, and also because a lot of things that they're more horror-like in the novel, that at least that I read so far, they're definitely not shown in the Untamed. Even if I compare the Untamed with the Donghua, that in that sense was a lot more faithful to the novel, that is definitely something that I didn't see in the Untamed. The Untamed was very mild, and I'm actually very grateful for that because I just do not like watching any of that. The other reason I think is maybe something related to censorship, like maybe you cannot show someone manipulating ghosts, but did we not see him manipulating ghosts? I think we did. So I don't know, but maybe something related to censorship forbids it for, him being that way. But I don't know. I think, at least in my opinion, it's very different to read things than to actually watch them happen. Or at least for me, there is. I'll give you an example. There is this new show, Interview with a Vampire, and I really want to watch it. However, I know that I won't. I know that I'm not going to watch the show because I know that it's probably pretty violent and it has a lot of blood and it's something that I won't be able to handle. Although I would probably happily read it. Like, I have no problem with reading things that are very violent. I just don't want to see them. The same happens to me with Game of Thrones. I have read all of the books from that series, like from, I don't remember the name of the series, but you know the series that I mean. But I could only watch the first season and I could watch no more of the show. And the books are much worse than the show in that sense, in the sense of violent describing things like that. But I could read them. To me, it's very different to read something than to actually show it. So I do wonder if there is an aspect of that maybe in the book we very happily accept where we should do these things because it's only up to our imagination, like what is he doing? But when we are actually faced with it, when we actually have the image in front of it, I think we'll probably find it a lot more horrifying. So I don't know. Again, this is just my opinion, but I think it's undeniable that the horror aspect of the show was definitely very downplayed in the Untamed. A lot less in the Donghua because I think it's animated and since you don't see real people, it's different. But I don't know. Finally, let's discuss the name of this arc. The name of this arc is Contentment. And why? Why is this arc called Contentment? I looked for the meaning of the word and apparently I already knew what the contentment mean, but I looked it up, especially if you see there was some other aspect of the meaning that I was missing. And contentment means to be in a state of happiness or satisfaction. And at first glance, this doesn't seem to fit the chapters very well, considering everything that's happening with the arm and the investigation and with Jingling. So it doesn't seem like there's any happiness or satisfaction in that sense. But I think in this case, probably the contentment doesn't come from what's happening externally, but rather what happens internally for the characters. I think it refers to the state of mind of Wei Wuxian and also from Lang Wenji. I think that we can see for ourselves, like in previous episodes when Wei Wuxian was in Cloud Recesses, he wanted to escape, he felt himself a prisoner, he was doing everything in his power to be thrown out, and now he just happily goes with Lang Wenji, and he says at I think it was chapter 20 that he says, oh, whenever I tried to escape, he brought me back. But there were several cases in which just walk in front of him and then came back, or he was away from him and then came back. And he seems to be quite happy in this. He seems to be quite content in doing this. And the same for Lang Wenji. You have to imagine that for Lang Wenji, after Wei Wuxian being dead for 13 years and now having him now, and then investigating together, seems like the dream for Lang Wenji. Like, if you imagine that maybe he had imagined a future with Lang Wenji going night hunting or something like that, this is pretty much, his dream come true. And I think for Wei Wuxian, this is something that is also fun because it's a mystery to solve. He gets to do whatever he wants. And I already mentioned that Wei Wuxian as motion use a lot freer than Wei Wuxian was. There is like a load that he doesn't have. Obviously, there is all this happening that it's there, but I feel like he doesn't feel the weight of it. Like in this time, he's just freer. And he gets to do this with Lang Wenji, and I think maybe that's the contentment part. But I don't know. Again, I should check the other translation to see whether the names of the... I think they have different names for the arcs, so maybe I'll check. As a matter of fact, I'm going to check now, and then I'm going to come back. So give me a second, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I am back, and I have the Seven Seas translation in front of me. This is volume 1. Don't ask me how I got it because I definitely didn't buy it, but I have it anyway. So I check. First of all, one of the first things that I noticed, I didn't read a lot, but I did notice that there is a different division in this one. In the Exiled Rebels translation, you have arcs, and inside of each arc, you have like the different chapters that are inside. In this case, it's only the arcs. It's called them chapters, and inside each arc or chapter, there is like the whole story for that arc, and that's it. So in this case, I had to look for in what they call chapter 5, which is the contentment arc, and in this way, it's called the Sunny Pier, which is very different. I don't know. I guess there is the idea of happiness there, as I understand it by Sunny, but there is a difference. One of them is an abstract noun, and the other one is a noun phrase with an adjective that, it's very different. But I have no idea which one is closer to what is actually in Chinese. In any case, there seems to have been maybe a little bit of work for the translator translating that. So I cannot complain. I cannot say anything because I have no idea what the original Chinese is. Now, for the matter of sabers, it actually uses sabers. Like in that part when they discover, like they open the coffin and they discover what is the long sword in the other one. This is definitely a saber in this one. And just in case, because I thought, oh, maybe it calls everything sabers. Like they don't have swords, they have sabers. So I went to the glossary to check if there was a sword entry, and there is one. So obviously it is making the distinction between a saber and a sword. But saber is not in the glossary, so it doesn't necessarily say what's the difference. So there you have it. Those are the difference. Let me know if you want me to continue with this translation. To be honest, I didn't. Now, when I open it now, I didn't even read the paragraph. I just looked for what I was looking. So I don't know. Maybe interesting to compare them, but maybe that is for another day. Okay, so that was the contentment arc. I'm not sure what is the next one here. It says the malevolent arc. Which could very well be. I don't know if that's how the arc is called in the version that I'm reading, but we'll find out the next time I read it. So I guess this is it for me. As I said, I'm going to try to do this more often. I'm going to try to take less time doing it. And now that I've solved my technical problems, hopefully I won't have any trouble. But to be honest, let's not hold our breath until next year. I think let's finish this year. Let's not have a lot of expectations for this year, because I certainly don't. It has been rough. So I'm going to finish here. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy your Halloween if you celebrate it. I don't, but I mean, well, I actually have to celebrate it in my teacher job because they celebrate it there. Not all of them, because I work in some schools that are very Catholic and you can't even mention Halloween. So not in those, but in some of my other jobs, I do celebrate Halloween. So I guess I'll be eating some candy, hopefully, and I'll have to wear a witch's hat or something like that. I don't know. So if you celebrate Halloween, I hope you have a great time. And if you don't, just have a great Monday. I don't know. So that's it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.